This is Stephanie. We are filming in my new kitchen. I moved apartments 2 months ago and I haven't really had the need to film in the kitchen, but my lighting in the living room is very dim and relaxing, but not very good for a video. So I don't even know what kind of category this video would fall into other than really cool stuff about the Chinese language. There you go. So this is a review of a TED Talk This is a review of a TED Talk from 2014. It's called How Chinese Characters Can Change English Language Education by poet Jonathan Stalling, S-T-A-L-L-I-N-G. I don't know why I'm spelling because it's going to be in the show notes, so don't you worry about that. It was at TEDxOU. That's not a TED Talk I'm familiar with. I've got oodles of notes and I want to show you one clip as well. Because this has been on my to-do list for quite some time because this is such an interesting idea. One of the things I studied in grad school in both programs, master's and PhD, was, or at least tried to lean my research towards, was global Englishes and just the idea that a language doesn't need to be how it's used just in the one place where a lot of people use it. That if there's a language like Chinese is probably turning into, but like English and French was in the past, and it is in some level still, and Spanish definitely is, where you have a language that's spoken in multiple places, to have not only a tolerance but an acceptance that there isn't only one way to say something. And that's why global Englishes was very appealing to me, because it was accepting and just getting over the it's right if you say it like me stuff. And that's why this video really caught my eye. And I've watched it maybe 10 times over the past few months because I've been trying to figure out how to incorporate it into this channel. And I don't think there is a way that I can do this other than just to do it. And I'm trying to get my laptop. I use boxes a lot to maneuver things around during these videos, if you haven't noticed. We're a zero profit organization. We're not even an organization. What am I saying? It's one person. It's me. Anyway, okay, so here we go. So what the heck is this video about? So like I said, Jonathan Stalling is a poet, and that's how he presents himself in the beginning. And I think he's much more than just a poet. I think he's a language geek, and I think he'd be perfectly comfortable saying that. And I think he's a very intelligent, sensitive, culturally interested, or interested in cultures and all those kinds of things. There's a lot of things he seems to be. I don't know a lot about him. I haven't done a lot of research off of this one TEDx video, and I probably should. What I'll probably do, which is what I generally do when I find videos like this, is I'll start to social media familiarize myself with people and start following them wherever I can find them so I can keep up with what they're doing. Because if people do really interesting things, they tend to consistently do pretty interesting things. Alright, so where to start? Let me see if I can narrow it. I took way too many notes and I realized that's not, going through them chronologically isn't necessarily the best way to do this. I think what he says at the end of the video is probably the most powerful. He says that his goal with using the Chinese language to teach the English language, no, that wasn't his goal actually. That's what accidentally happened. What he was trying to do was to use the Chinese language and the sounds within that to get ancient Chinese poems to sound like it while having the words actually be in English, so that you didn't have to learn Chinese necessarily in order to appreciate the flow and the stories within those poems. So that's how he started making this thing that he called Yinglish, which is Y-I-N-G-E-L-I-S-H. I constantly spell things. You'll just have to deal with that. And it turned into a book, and then it turned into an opera. And there's an example. I don't want to show you the example because later on the clip I'm going to show you has some examples. So we'll wait until that. So why he wanted to do this is, and here's the interesting flow I need you to understand. It's probably this way, right? Okay, if we're English speakers, it's left to right. If we're Arabic speakers, it's right to left. See, there's so many things that we do that we don't even realize are so culturally tied together, and then we do them and wonder why people don't understand us, and that ties into this video so much. And this is bad in some places too, sorry. So here's the thing. For English speakers learning Chinese, we have pinyin. It's using kind of the Latin script with the Chinese tones. And that helps us have a bridging point to learn Chinese. Now, I do understand that young children in China also use pinyin to learn Chinese. Okay, fine. So it wasn't, I don't think it was specifically meant for people speaking other languages to learn Chinese. I think it was meant to just increase literacy. If I am totally wrong on that, please comment below. I have not looked at the history of Chinese in probably like 9 or 10 months, and I don't even remember if that's true or if I'm making that up or somebody told me that. But I think that is the point of pinyin. I think it was created 1950s, 1960s, I want to say. Okay. But the point of this is that coming from English, specifically selfishly, because that is the language that I am, the only language that I am fluent in, coming from English, there is pinyin, and that bridges us over to the Hanzi characters. But when you go from Chinese to English, there's Chinese, the Hanzi characters, and then there's English. And what people use to teach English is English. Do you see what's missing? 3 parts, going from English to Chinese. And I'll show you my really, really rudimentary thing here. So going English, there's pinyin, which has the sounds and the tones, and then you can learn Chinese, the Hanzi characters. Going from Chinese, before Jonathan, there was nothing. People used English to learn English. And I had to really chew on that for a while. The first probably 2 times I watched this video, I paused at that moment that he said that. I did a drawing very much like this, and I just thought about it, and I thought, holy cow. That's not something we often think about when we judge the accuracy of Chinese speakers of English, is that they literally had no scaffolding when it came to switching those scripts. There were no real stepping stones to help them with the vast difference in sounds between Chinese and English. They went straight in. No help. Some English speakers who learn Chinese never leave pinyin. And depending on your goal, that's perfectly fine. But pinyin, according to Jonathan, is an interlanguage. I'm not sure if I agree with that or not. I'm having my own struggles with the term interlanguage. You can see a video I did recently on that. But he says this is an interlanguage. It's not the full language. He said Jonathan said, if I were to write a letter to my friend, and I wrote it in pinyin first, I couldn't send that to him because he would be like, what is this? This isn't real language yet. He'd have to write it in the Hanzi characters, the Chinese Hanzi characters, in order for it to be authentic communication in that language, because pinyin's what you use to get to the real language. And the reason why this is hard for English speakers is because unless you try to learn Chinese, you don't really need that for some languages. You don't need that for Romance languages because we all use the Latin script, Roman script. I keep doing that. Now, is there an interlanguage? Is there the equivalent of pinyin when you learn Arabic, which is a very different script? I don't know. If you do, please leave it in the comment sections below. I know that Thai, the script for Thai came from Sanskrit, right? Is there an interlanguage there, similar to pinyin, that can bridge you in? There probably is. Even within Chinese, pinyin is one of interlanguage in Taiwan. When I was there, they used wave guiles, and I think there was another one. They were switching between 2 when I lived there. And it was very confusing because the signs would be different. I think I've talked about that before. So for Chinese, there seems to be an acknowledgement pretty early on that there needs to be something to help with learning the language, whether it be for children learning it the first time or adults coming over and learning from a different language. But for Chinese people learning English, there really hasn't been anything. And so poet Jonathan Stalin comes in, he does these poems, he changes these poems to sound like Chinese, but to be in English, and so that the English meaning, or the Chinese meaning, can come through to folks without the years and years of investment of learning the Chinese language. So what happened is that this went over really, really well in China, and he noticed that the book and the opera specifically, was being downloaded at a particular school 50 times a day. And he's like, what's happening here? And what happened is that at this one particular school, he said they started to teach the children English through the language that he created, the interlanguage that was needed, that he calls Sai No English. And they started to use that in order to bridge the children into learning English. And he said, no, what are you doing? You shouldn't do that. You'll get stuck in the interlanguage and you'll sound you just won't, like, nobody will understand you, because you'll be learning the language in a way that is not used. It's essentially like, I don't know. He did some pidgin comparisons, but I never fully understood the grammatical role of pidgin in my linguistics classes. So I'm going to let you watch to get the full comparison with that. But the clip I'm about to play for you is an interesting part of what he said his goal was versus what they wanted to use it for, and that kind of struggle of when you create something, it doesn't necessarily mean that's what it's going to be used for. So one second, let me show you the screen. Okay, here we go.
And against my protestation that this was not, in fact, its purpose, that the purpose was to recalibrate our ears to hear interlanguage as it is, not as we have inherited it through yellow-faced minstrelsy and mock Chinese and other ways which predetermine the meaning of the accent, that really didn't matter, because the students and teachers said, no, you don't understand. That might have been your purpose for doing this opera, but for us it works really well to teach English. And so I accepted an invitation to come to Beijing to one of the...
Okay, and I'll fill you in on the rest of that. So he went to this school, and he he had this whole history lesson on why this shouldn't be done, what was done before, again, the pidgin historical and grammatical information, and he was trying to convince them to stop doing this. And they're like, no, it's working. It's helping on so many levels the kids to learn the language. So he was like, okay, so there it is. So crazy, right? It's so crazy that there hasn't been a stepping stone. Like, how many Chinese people have you met who could speak English? And they just went, I mean, geez, can you imagine learning to speak and read Chinese without pinyin? I can't even imagine, and yet that's what they did. I mean, this is what one of my burning questions was a few months ago, was that for children that grew up learning Chinese, if what I think is true, that they learn the pinyin to then learn the Hanzi characters, did the pinyin help them with crossing over to English? I mean, it might visually, but sound-wise, grammatically, it's still not going to help there, right? So, I mean, I don't know. It's just crazy to think about that there's no real stepping stone from Chinese to English. I never really thought of it like that. Anyway, it didn't work. They didn't stop using it to teach children. In fact, he started to kind of get on board and to understand how many English language learners there are in China. And he did one comparison where he was talking about China has more English language learners than there are Americans alive today. Chew on that one. He did more comparisons where he put together a bunch of inner circle countries like England and Australia, New Zealand, the US, that kind of, Canada. I know I'm missing somebody, I'm really sorry, but I really hate the whole inner circle, outer circle thing. Yeah, anyway, just geek out and Google it if you want. But those stats are in there if you want to do that. He also finished the talk by talking about this fiction book. And I didn't get a chance to write down the author's name. It was the Chinese author who wrote Land of Manifold Tongue. And so, oh, sorry, I'm missing a step before I get to that book. So what he ended up doing was to, because of the stubbornness of those students and because he saw what they were doing and the results they were getting, he was like, well, if we're going to do this, let's do this. So he kind of fleshed out the rest of what needed to exist in his Sai No English interlanguage between Chinese and English. He needed to add some sounds. I think V was one of them, and Z is a sound, but it's way back here. Z, I think that's here. The Z does definitely exist in Chinese, but the frontal one, which I suck at the whole mouth position terminology thing. So there were a couple of sounds he needed to create, and then he needed to add vowels because Chinese, for those of you that speak it, know that there are echo vowels where every consonant has, or every syllable has a vowel, but that doesn't necessarily, that most of the time doesn't exist. That doesn't always exist when you use it to speak English. Like please. If you've lived in Asia, in Northeast Asia especially, you'll hear people say RNG instead of orange, because it's not just because the E's there and the E's not vocalized in English, it's because a lot of the languages in the region have a vowel for every syllable, and Chinese is one of those. And so you'll be like, no, don't say the E, and what needs to be said is more of, it's just, yeah, I don't know what needs to be said. I couldn't get a lot of my kids to do it either when I was teaching English, the only time I was teaching kids. Goodness. Oh, no, it wasn't. I did it again in Vietnam. But anyway, that's not the point. The point is, so now there's the entire alphabet, the entire interlanguage called Sai No English that exists. And this TED Talk that he did in 2014 apparently is when he unveiled it to the world, where he released it into the wild. So I suppose what I should do in a follow-up video, now that I'm thinking about this, is to go into Google and see what's been done with it, see who's been using it, if anybody's done if the videos on how to use it, has it worked better than other methods? Have you seen this? Have you used Sai No English? If you're a Chinese speaker that has learned English, does this sound like something that you grew up learning, or probably more so since it was 2014? Is it something that you've heard about being introduced into the Chinese education system? Education in most countries, if not all countries in the world, is very slow to change. So I would imagine that this would be introduced into very high-level schools first and private schools probably same time, if not sooner. More traditional, more local schools would be slower. That's just the trend globally. Mostly. I'm not saying that China's like everywhere and everywhere is like China, but generally speaking, education is slow to change. But it'd be interesting. I will make a note to do a follow-up video and see what has happened with this thing that he has released into the world, this interlanguage between Chinese and English. It wasn't meant to be a teaching tool, but that has turned into one. What has happened with it? What has happened with it? I want to show you one more clip where he shows... Oh, okay, now I get to talk about the book, the fiction book, and then I will show you some examples of the full picture of how this can be used, not just to learn English, but to learn other languages. Yes, you heard me. The Chinese script, Chinese language can be used as an interlanguage for Chinese people to learn other languages. Hold that thought for a second. The book is called Land of Manifold Tongue, and I do apologize. I was writing so many things down that I didn't write the author's name, but it's at the end. It's after 15 minutes of the 18-minute video, so it's in there. You can find the author. Okay, so the fiction book was written way before Jonathan ever started to develop the system for the initial poems that started this whole process. From what I understand, is a quick summary of the book is that the author envisioned this world, this island, where these people developed this writing system that you could use phonetically to write out the sounds of any language in the world. And there was one physical book of this on the island, and nobody was allowed to leave it, or if they left the island, they weren't allowed to take it with them. They weren't allowed to tell people about it. It was supposed to be a very secretive, very powerful book. And so the whole story revolves around that book and that key to every language in the world. So with that in mind, not only is the Sai No English, which is probably sadly named now that it's been used to teach multiple languages, but the Sai No English alphabet, I suppose you could say. The Interlanguage is what he keeps using, so I'll just use that. Not only is that released into the world, but it can be used to learn other languages. So let me show you another clip of how that's done.
This cover is not a language I can learn or peel away. Now while I'm working on these, and the goal I'll talk about a little later, is to actually try to get the accuracy of those phonetic scripts to replicate the English speech sounds as best as one can. And then at the point where one cannot do that, to invent new graphemes, assign those graphemes the English missing sounds, and then be able to write English quite well using other graphic systems. While I'm doing this, English is being downloaded in China. And to my surprise, when I'm getting emails from students and teachers...
Okay, so I started it a little bit too late, but I think you got the Arabic part down, right? Oh wait, there's one more thing. Okay, that gives you a little idea of what I was saying, but he has an example a little bit later in the video that I think really fleshes this out more, so I'm going to play you one more clip.
Here's an example of one of our, someone who's only studied the alphabet for 5 hours. Now, they don't have anything but the Chinese alphabet, the pinyin to read. Okay, so within 5 hours, they're going to pronounce these words.
Hello. Bonjour. Guten Tag. Hola. Ciao. Hola. Hola. Ciao. Gagam. Sa. Ha. Neda.
Okay, I think you got the idea. And my mind was blown when I saw this. I was like, wait a minute. Awesome. Not only does this fill in a gap for folks that are going from Chinese to English, but you can then use this interlanguage to learn to say any language. Okay, I want you guys to think about that for a minute. And I'm sorry if you hear a little bit of crackling. It's getting a little late and I needed to start my dinner. I multitask. Anyway, so that's just the beginning. I mean, I know it's crazy because this video is longer than his video. His TED Talk is 18 minutes and this video is over 23, but I just really felt like this needed to be shared. This is such a wonderful step in the right direction of, instead of saying my language, your language, we end up somehow finding those bridges to each other's languages in ways where you don't have to spend your entire life to get to the point where you can communicate with another population of people through their language. I mean, it's just, although this is learning another language, but using the writing system that you already know. As he mentions in the video, and that is way too obvious because I studied teaching writing for a long time, what felt like a long time. Writing systems are arbitrary and they're historical, and a lot of times they have negative shit attached to them. And I hated that part of it because writing was an expression of freedom for me my entire life, but it's not. When you're not literate in a particular language, it is quite the opposite. And using things like this, I think, can really blow open communication and freedom of ideas, and I think it can really bridge boundaries culturally in ways that I don't even think we'll understand for a while. So I'm really fascinated. So watch out for part 2 of this video. I promise to do some research after dinner, but it'll probably be a few weeks. I have a few other things on my plate right now, but I'm definitely going to do a part 2 of this video to see what has happened with the interlanguage that Jonathan has created, whether it is where he thought it was going to go or not. Generally speaking, what has happened with it? Is it still out in the world, or has it just fallen apart and it didn't really work? People didn't want something that useful. I'm a little biased, as you can tell. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope you go, even though you know what's in it, I did save some surprises for you, some other interesting things, and you'll be able to see it a lot clearer than you will me turning my camera around. So I hope you really go watch his TED Talk. I think you'll find it interesting, even though you'll know the gist of what he's saying. Alright, I look forward to your ideas and your comments below. After you watch it, I'd love to know what you think of this kind of thing. Thank you, Satyen.